Welcome to Casual Friday. I'm currently in Kansas City at Plyaway, so I recorded this episode of Casual Friday last weekend, just a couple of days after I recorded the previous Casual Friday. I do have a little bit of an update on the Edwardian sweater as well as a new project that I'm working on that I want to share with you. I got a haircut last week, and when I go to the hair salon, I always bring a knitting project with me because I never know if I'm going to have a little bit of a wait or not. Plus, my hairdresser knows that I knit, and she's always interested to see what it is I've been working on. So I think the previous time I went to see her, I took something with me, but I was on a hiatus on the Edwardian sweater at the time. And she was asking what I was working on, and I said, you might be interested in this Edwardian sweater I'm working on. And so I found the photos of the pattern photos on my phone, and I showed them to her, and she went nuts over it. She's like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing. And she's about my age, a couple of years younger, very fashionable, very hip to all the trends in fashion and all that sort of thing, where I am not. And she kept saying that that's going to be so great when you wear that because it's so in fashion right now. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, puffy sleeves are really in fashion and it's just going to look great. And I said, well, I have no intention of actually wearing this sweater. I will try it on, but I'm not going to wear this thing because I'm looking at these drawings and the photograph from 100 and some years ago. And I'm thinking nobody is going to be able to pull this sweater off nowadays. And she said at the time, if you don't want to wear it when you're done with it, she said, I'd buy it from you. Just tell me how much. It's probably thousands of dollars, but just tell me and I would like to buy it from you. So that statement tells you a couple of things. One, it tells you that she values my skill and that it's worth a lot of money. I have said before, I don't sell my knitting. This particular situation seemed very different to me, and I had to think about it because obviously I wasn't knitting it on commission. I didn't intend to wear it, and she was willing to pay, it sounded like, quite a lot of money for it. And so I did think about it on and off for a couple of weeks, and I finally decided that even though I wasn't going to wear it, I still wanted to keep it because I thought it was a great teaching and learning tool. And I was so invested in it that I just couldn't bear parting with it. And I didn't really know that she was serious. It just didn't seem to me like she was actually serious about it. But I did want to bring it with me when I got my hair cut this past week. And when I brought it, it was in the same state that I showed you guys last week, where I had seamed the side seams and there was one sleeve put in. It still needed the other sleeve sewn in and the neck needed to be sewn in. So, but I pulled it out to show it to her, and again, she just went crazy over it. And she's like, I'm not kidding you, there's at least 2 people in this salon who would want to buy that from you. And I like, oh, thank you. And I just kind of put it to the side. So when I left the hair salon, I saw on the sidewalk there was a sign, one of those kind of folding triangular signs that you can write on chalkboard with it. It was on the sidewalk just outside the hair salon, and it said Harriet and Alice, and it had an arrow pointing up the kind of the corridor. There's a lot of construction going on in that area right now, and so it made sense to me that if you wanted your customers to know where you were, you might put a sign up. But that shop had been there for a couple of years now, and I'd never seen a sign in the sidewalk like that. And I had seen another one on the sidewalk across from the parking ramp when I had come up to the hair salon. So I thought, why do they have so many signs up? And then I remembered it was Shop Hop weekend. So 2 years ago, I actually went on the Shop Hop in the Twin Cities because the shop where I had taught and that I had been a customer at for over 20 years had closed. The owner had retired. And so I had to figure out what's my yarn shop going to be. And I had been to a few of the shops in the area, but I hadn't been to all of them. I didn't really know what all was available. So 2 years ago, I did the Shop Hop, and it was like somewhere between 12 and 14 shops. and you go from place to place to place, and it was exhausting. I'm not a shopper, and I thought, well, I'm glad I did that. I'm never doing that again. Well, it wasn't until a few months later that Harriet and Alice opened up, and they opened up in the building where my dentist office is. So it's very close to where I get my hair cut, but it's actually in the building where my dentist's office is. And I had heard that this new shop was opening somewhere at, it's called 50th in France, that it was opening up somewhere around there, and I just couldn't visualize where it was. So when I was at the dentist, my hygienist, who is also a knitter, we usually spend a good 15 minutes talking about knitting before she starts cleaning my teeth. She said to me, oh, have you been to Harriet and Alice? And I said, no, I heard it's around here, but I don't know where. She goes, well, it's just downstairs from here. So on my way out, I went into Harriet and Alice, and it's a cute little shop. It's a really nice little shop. It is small. And I just kind of went in, and I was looking around, and what I saw that they had that I hadn't seen in any other shop that I could think of was Regia sock yarn, which is my favorite self-striping sock yarn brand. They had Regia sock yarn in a 6-ply version, and it was in these 150-gram balls. And that was when I was just starting to think about knitting socks for my brother. And I thought, well, this would be perfect for him because I need more yarn than comes in a 100-gram ball. And I also like knitting his socks with a little bit thicker yarn so I don't have to have so many stitches. So I bought up a bunch of the Regia 6-ply there. And I've been back there a couple of times, usually when I'm leaving the dentist, because that's when I think about it and I'm walking right by, and so I just kind of turn and go in there. So when I was coming out of the hairdresser and I saw the sign, I thought, why is the sign there? And then I realized it was Shop Hop weekend, and that's why the signs were there. And then I thought, well, I'm going to be doing all this traveling, and I really don't know what projects I'm going to be taking with me. And I should just pop in there and see what they have, because on the Shop Hop there's usually a theme that all of the stores are part of, and it might be music or something else, and everybody has an independent dyer dye a custom colorway for them, and then they give away a pattern to go along with that colorway that they had designed specifically for Shop Hop. So I thought, oh, you know, they probably have some kind of accessory thing going on. I should look to see if that might be what I want. Well, I walk in, and I never did find out what the theme was, what the colorway was, what their pattern was. Because when I walked in, there was a display of Regia sock yarn right in front of me, but it was a little bit different than I had seen before. It was the Regia Perfect, which I had seen before and I've knit with a couple of times. But it was 60-gram balls of yarn, and the colorways are for kids. And the first colorway that kind of caught my eye was one that was orange with some blues and other colors in it. And normally I don't like orange, but that particular ball of sock yarn I thought might be great for one of the kids that my daughter's an au pair for in the Netherlands. And the reason I thought he might really like that is because in the Netherlands, like orange is their sort of national color, and it comes from William of Orange, or William the Silent, who I think he led some kind of revolt against the Spanish, and that's how the Dutch got their independence. So the royal family is of like Orange Nassau is what their family house is. And so every year they celebrate the birth of whoever the current king or queen or princess or whoever is currently holds that seat. They celebrate their birthday, and it's called King's Day, and everybody in the entire country wears orange. So I thought, well, that might be a really fun thing to make a pair of socks for this little kiddo. He's 5 years old, and maybe he would like a pair of socks to go with them. So I was texting my daughter, and then I was looking at the other colorways. So it turns out they have 8 colorways, and I bought 4 of them. So they have 2 different kinds of blue colorways. So I bought one of those, like different shades of blue. And so I bought one of the blue ones. I didn't see the other one. I just looked it up online to see what else they had. Then I got one that was reds, and I think there's 2 different red colorways as well. And then I bought a green one. And I think the other colors, so besides another blue and another red, there's 2 different kind of gray colorways. One has pinks and the other one has various colors in it. I can't remember what they are. But the one that had originally caught my eye was one that was orange, like that. So I went ahead and I thought, well, there are other kids in this family. I just bought these 4 colors and thought, well, if the other kids would like socks, I can make socks for them too. So I asked my daughter, I said, when is King's Day? She said, April 27th. So we're going to be there before King's Day. So my plan was I'm going to make this little kiddo some orange socks. And I said, well, send me his foot measurements. And she said, well, I'm not going to see the kids until Monday. This was Thursday night. She says, they're in bed right now. And the parents are going out of town for the weekend and the grandparents are taking them. So I won't see them until Monday that's when I was going to be on the road going down to Pliaway. So I couldn't stand it. I wanted to start these socks. So the idea behind Perfect is that you can make a pair of matching socks without having to worry about it. The ball of yarn, if you can see right here, see how there's like yellow right here? So the ball of yarn begins with yellow. There's several yards of yellow, and then the actual colorway starts. So you know to cast on without including the yellow. So you cast on, when you get past the yellow in the ball of yarn, then you cast on with whatever color is there, and you knit in ribbing until that color ends. And then once the striping sequence begins, you just knit and stockinette, and you keep knitting in there until the self-striping ends. And then you get to the heel color. Well, in the original Perfect, what they had were, this is one of the original colorways, they would have stripes, and then once the solid color began, you would knit whatever kind of heel you wanted, and then you'd knit your foot, and so the whole foot would be this other solid color. And for me, since I'm mostly at home without my shoes on, I like to see my feet. And this kind of took the fun out of it. So what happens is when you're done with your foot, then there's probably still, in this case, still gray left, and you'd wind off that gray, and then you get to the middle of the ball where there was another section of yellow. So you get past that section of yellow, and then you can start the next sock, and then they'll both be exactly the same. And what that means is that if you have a larger leg and you cast on more stitches, then the leg is going to end up shorter for you. And if you have a skinny leg, then the leg is going to end up longer. Well, this was a sock where I just wanted to try it out because I really enjoy making my socks match. That's part of the fun for me, is I knit the first sock and I see how the colorway plays out, and I can see how the colors transition and if a color might occur more than once in a particular sequence. And then I can see it. So when I get done with the first sock, I know where I am in the colorway, and then I can just wind off enough yarn until I get to the point where I had started with the first sock, and then I can start my second sock. So it's pretty easy for me, and it's also one of the many reasons I don't knit 2 at a time, because I want my socks to match, and I can't always tell when I'm just winding yarn off of a ball of self-striping yarn. I can't always tell where the color sequence is ending. And so, because I want them to match 2 at a time, it's not going to work for me. When I was knitting these, I was also experimenting with short row heels because I have a skinny ankle and a tall heel, and short row heels don't tend to fit. And I was working on my ideas for how to to customize the fit and make it fit perfectly. And that's what I did with this heel. And these fit me really well, and I actually have grown to really like these socks quite well. But this is the original Perfect. The next time I bought Perfect, there was color patterning on the foot, and I bought a colorway that was designed by Arnie and Carlos, and I knit through the leg, and I got to the point where the heel was to begin, and I did not like that particular colorway. It was one of the things that I'd been sitting in my bins until finish at February, and I kind of evaluated it, and I thought, I do not like this, and I gave the yarn away to someone in my knitting group. She was happy, I was happy, I was done with it. And there are some colorways that they have that I was fine with, that this particular one, just the way it played out, I didn't like. Well, these kids' ones are Arnie and Carlos also. And the difference between this, because they have coloring on the foot, the way this plays out for the Perfect socks for these is that you need to do a short row heel. So here I've started with the orange sock. I've started with the orange. It's switched to the striping, and I'm supposed to just keep knitting that until it turns to the solid orange again. Then I would do a short row heel. And then when I was done with the heel, I would continue knitting, and pretty soon, if it hadn't already, then it would switch to the striping pattern. And then when I got to the toes, then I would just decrease for the toes. So there are a couple of questions in there that aren't really answered online, and it's really up to the knitter, which is, what do you do if your feet are short and you haven't hit the contrast color when it's time to do the toes? Well, for me, I would just wind off the yarn till I hit the orange and then rejoin it. And then knit the toes. But the short row heel is the place where some people may not want to do that necessarily. And it's not clear to me how much yarn there really is for that short row heel. It has to be enough for any person's short row heel if they've got a big foot or a small foot. So I'm not really clear on how that's going to work. So I wanted to start these socks for this 5-year-old. My daughter didn't have his measurements. So I thought, well, I bet you I can estimate how big around his leg is and just knit the leg. And that went really quickly. And I need to wait to find out more about his heel measurements and just make sure that his leg measurement is correct. And so I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just wind off the yarn until I get to the section where for the second sock, and then I'll start the second sock. So that's what I did. So I've knit one sock, and now I'm starting the second. And that's when I realized the advantage of Perfect is if you like to do 2 at a time, because you can wind off the yarn until you find the starting point for the second sock and then start them both at the same time. So there is no advantage if you like to knit 1 at a time. There's not really an advantage. But if you do like to knit 2 at a time, the Perfect is a nice way to make sure that you do have matching socks if you're like me and you want your socks to match. But if you're not like me and you like to knit them 2 at a time. So I was knitting those little socks, and I got up on Saturday morning and I said, I have to stop knitting on these little socks. I need to finish seaming in the sleeve for my Edwardian sweater and get that neck seamed in as well. So I got the second sleeve in. I'd done the first one. I'd kind of figured out how to do things. So the second one went pretty easily. Then I had to figure out how to do the neck. And the challenge with the neck is that I had this piece of ribbing, about a big rectangle of ribbing, that was nice and stretchy with no problem fitting around my neck. But there's so much fabric for the fronts of the sweater that I wasn't sure how to seam them together. So there are horizontal edges along both the neck and the ribbed neck and the neck of the body. But there's way more stitches in the body, and fewer of them on the back than on the front, like twice as many on the front as on the back. And I just wasn't quite sure, did I want to use the same rate of seaming together for the front and the back, or did I want to do something different for the back than the front? I wasn't sure. So I tried one method, and there were 2 problems. One was that I was pulling the seaming yarn so that the 2 edges came completely together and you couldn't see the seaming yarn, which is the typical way that I seam. But it wasn't stretchy. This fabric was so stiff, and it wasn't working out. Things weren't working out, so I knew I had to rip it out. What I decided to do the second time around was that as I seamed it, I was only pulling the seaming yarn until it looked like it was grafted, looked like I had grafted the 2 things together. So it looks like a row of stockinette that's joining the neck to the body. And because I hadn't pulled tight, I just pulled it tight enough to make the stitches match the other stitches. There's a lot more stretch to it. That made me pretty happy. So I decided I should try this on, because my hairdresser had asked me, have you tried this on? I said, no. So once I got the neck and the other sleeve on, I went downstairs and I tried it on. And I was able to get it around me. That was one thing I was worried about. Is it actually going to close all the way around me? And I thought, well, this looks way better on than I had imagined. Like the sleeves aren't actually quite as puffy as they look in the photograph of the pattern, probably because I'm 4 to 6 inches taller than the model, and so my arms are longer. But it looked much better than I expected. And I was showing it to my husband. He's like, yeah, that's actually not a bad sweater. He said that would be what I would call a statement piece. And I said, yeah, I just can't see myself wearing it though. But I was pretty pleased with it. Well, after lunch, I was driving in the car with my daughter, and I mentioned to her that I had finished seaming it up. And I don't know that she has really seen too much of this sweater as I've been knitting it. Sometimes she watches my videos, but I really don't know what she had seen of the sweater. But she knew something about it. And I was telling her, I said, well, I tried it on and it actually doesn't look too bad. I said, but I would like it if you could try it on so that I could kind of walk around you and just to see how it fits, because that's hard for me to do if I'm wearing it myself. And she said, oh, sure, no problem. She said, actually, if you're not going to wear it, after you're done with it, she said, it is in fashion now. That style will be in fashion. And at least right now it is. She said, and I'd be happy to take it and wear it until, the 10 minutes from now when it's not in fashion anymore. And then I give it back to you. And I said, really? Like you would actually wear it? She said, sure. And so we got home and I had her try it on, and she was actually really pleased with it. And she's got these light green eyes. It's a good color match actually for her. It looks good on her. It fits her really well. And she was super delighted with it. She's like, this is like a couture piece. Like you couldn't just go into any store and buy this. This is like a statement piece. She and my husband, this is a statement piece. Then I started rethinking, the way I was going to connect the front. I had bought this snap tape that I knew wasn't quite right. And just the further along, the closer I got to the actual finishing of the sweater, the more I actually wanted it to look right. And since she wants to wear it, I want to really, wanted to be careful and thoughtful about how the closures were going to work. So I told her what I thought the buttons were going to be, that the two fronts were going to come together and the button would just go through the fabric like this, and there would be small buttons, like a whole bunch of them. And she thought that would be in keeping with the style, and she was perfectly happy with that. So I did go to this fabric store in St. Paul called Treadle Yard Goods that I always go to when I'm looking for buttons for my sweaters. And I just wanted somebody else who knew something about dressmaking, even if they didn't know anything about knitting sweaters, who could look at this garment and see what it actually looked like and could feel it and flip it over, and that we could kind of talk through how the button closures were going to work. We both kind of came to the conclusion that sticking a button through it, if it was going to be a challenge, and I really didn't want to put wear on the stitches, like shoving them through there. And she was concerned that if they were small enough to get through between the stitches, then they were small enough to come back out, and then it would gape open and it wouldn't work very well. And so we both decided that my original idea, which was to have the ribbon on the back of the fabric and have the buttonhole in there, and then the button will be flat and it will just button through the buttonhole and in between the ribbon and the face of the fabric and the actual knitted fabric. So we're going to do that, but then down at the ribbing, I'm going to have these little more like pearl type of buttons that will help close the ribbing at the bottom, and then also the fold over neck. So that's my current plan. And when I saw how many buttons it's going to be 17 buttons of these flat buttons, because this is long. It's not just from here to here, it's from here to here by way of this blousing effect. So it's a longer front than you would have on a normal sweater. So I was thinking about, how I was going to do buttonholes, and I thought I'm going to have to figure out how to do this on my sewing machine. Now, I've had my sewing machine for maybe close to 35 years, more than 30, not quite 35. I think I got it in 1986. I'd been living overseas for a year and I came home. It was a month or two after my birthday. And my mother wanted to get me a birthday present and I said I wanted a sewing machine. So we went to JoAnn Fabrics and we got a store brand sewing machine, totally mechanical. I've used it for years, but I sew the way I used to knit, which is I get a pattern and I follow the directions and I know nothing about making modifications or doing anything fancy. And I lost the manual a couple of years after I got the machine. So I have all of these parts that I didn't know how to use, and there's certain things I never really figured out. I made my kids' Halloween costumes every year, and every so often I would look online to see if that manual was online. It never was, it never was, it never was. So I haven't made my kids' Halloween costumes for more than 10 years. So recently I thought I really want to get my sewing machine overhauled. It was I didn't even know how to oil it, and it's been more than 30 years. So I went online again and I looked at the exact model number because I had always just looked for JoAnn store brand sewing machine, and I kind of got a better hit on it, and I realized, oh, it's a JoAnn Sonata, and then there's a model number on the back of the machine. So I went and I looked at it. So it's a JoAnn Sonata 540. And when I did that, I got a hit on a woman who does sewing, and that's the machine that she has. And 10 years ago, so after I stopped making my kids' Halloween costumes, she had scanned her manual and posted it online. So I now have a manual. And so I brought it upstairs yesterday after I came back from the fabric store. This would be last Saturday. I brought it upstairs. I figured out how to oil it. I got all the lint out of the I never knew how to take the bobbin casing thing out of the sewing machine. There's all this lint in there, which is probably why it was making weird clunking noises. And then I figured out how to use the buttonholer and the attachment for that and how to make a buttonhole. So I figured out how to do a buttonhole. And then I figured out how to sew on buttons using the sewing machine. There's a special little foot that you can put on there and it will sew the buttons, because I have so many buttons to put on there. I thought, well, this will make it a lot faster. So I did some practicing with that and I realized, oh, I need to adjust the stitch length a little bit, and I should probably get a finer needle than I was using on my practice. But I'm very excited about that I'm going to be able to do this. And it also makes me think that going forward, I'm going to do more buttonholes in ribbons, because I have done some sweaters where I do the grosgrain bit ribbon on the back. And I really prefer that look because it keeps the front bands just looking in good shape. And because one of the problems, even if I do a really great job with my buttons and my buttonholes, that after a while when things pull or whatever, things start to gap and it doesn't look as good. And I want to give it some more structure. And now I know how to do these buttonholes. Then I can do buttonholes in the ribbon and put that on the back of the button bands and get everything lined up, and I think it'll be a much nicer look. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll do a little bit of an overhead so you can see the ribbons that I bought and the buttons that I bought and what I'm planning to do. So I have the collar done. I realize I have a little bit more to sew in right here, just at the very, oh, I see what happened. I ran out of yarn tail. So I need to finish sewing that in here. But otherwise, it's completely sewn up. I have to weave in ends. Originally, I was going to use snap tape in order to close the fronts here. And when I ordered it, I knew it was a lighter color. I didn't realize how much lighter it was, and I was concerned that it would show up in between here, like when it was closed, that it would be visible. And I wasn't sure if I cared, since I wasn't ever planning on wearing this. But instead, I got some dark green ribbon, which is going to work really well with this, and it will hide really well because it's darker. It'll hide better in between the two fronts here. So what I'll be doing is I'll be putting in buttonholes all the way down this ribbon. I think I'm going to have 17 buttons and buttonholes. and that will go into the ribbon. So this button I did with purple thread just so I could practice. So I did a buttonhole and then I sewed a button on. And what's going to happen is that the button will go into the buttonhole like this. And the two pieces will be facing each other between the two fronts of the sweater here. So the buttons will be on one side and the buttonholes will be on the other, and you'll button it into the ribbon. And so the button will lie between the ribbon and the back side of the fabric like that. So the buttons will be going all the way down the main body of the sweater, but then when it gets down to the ribbing here, that's a little trickier. So I think the ribbon will only go down to the bottom of here, and then I'm going to put in a couple of buttons on the ribbing here, and then I'm going to have some loops that I crochet that will go around those buttons. Now, the place where I got the dark green buttons that are for the main part didn't have any little tiny pearl style buttons, but they did have these. They look kind of clear on camera, but they're light green. And the idea was that I could sew them on here and they would kind of disappear. My daughter didn't really like that idea. I bought these buttons at JoAnn, and I think that's going to work. So I'll put a couple of buttons right here, and then for the closure at the top, it looks like in the photograph that just these two ends are buttoned together and that maybe these are kept open like this. And so then I would put another button here at the base. But I'm not 100% sure, and I don't know if I'm not 100% sure what exactly I'm going to do up here, but I think it's going to involve these buttons. Besides Plyaway, I have several other trips on the horizon, so I'm thinking that at least one of those videos will be a Q&A, and I've been accumulating questions to answer. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me for a Casual Friday, you can leave those down in the comments below, or if you have suggestions for any other type of video you'd like to see from me, I'd love to hear that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.